The stars beyond the frontier burned cold and distant, but the space around them blazed with the heat of 3,000 war engines. Supreme Commander Al stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. His fleet stretched across the void like a net of steel and fire, each ship positioned with precision that spoke of decades of military conquest. The Dominion had crushed 47 star systems. They had brought entire civilizations to their knees. They had perfected the art of overwhelming force, and today they would add one more victory to their record. "Status report," Al commanded, his voice carrying the rough edge of his species. His 4 eyes scanned the displays, taking in every detail of his perfect formation. "All ships in position, Commander," his tactical officer replied. "The human colony on 442B has no defensive platforms, no orbital stations, nothing. They are completely exposed." Al allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans were newcomers to this region of space, barely a century into their expansion beyond their home system. They had established a small colony on the planet below, perhaps 15,000 individuals trying to build new lives on a world far from Earth. It would be simple to destroy them, to send a message to the galaxy that the Dominion would tolerate no challenges to their supremacy. "Open a channel to the colony," he ordered. "Let them see what comes for them." Across the system, sensor networks belonging to a dozen different species monitored the situation. The assembly watched with concern. The collective observed with cold calculation. Smaller civilizations simply waited to see which way the wind would blow. Everyone knew they did not make empty threats. Inside the Endeavor, a human ship conducting a survey mission 3 light-years away, the distress signal arrived like a hammer blow. Captain Daniel Cross read the message twice before he believed it. His bridge crew turned to look at him, waiting for orders. The message was clear. 3,000 warships surrounding a defenseless human colony, demanding surrender within 6 hours or they would begin bombardment. "How far are we?" Daniel asked, his voice steady. Lisa Park checked her console. "At maximum acceleration, we can reach them in 4 hours, she said. Her fingers moved across the controls, calculating trajectories and power consumption. "But Captain, we're the only human ship in range." "Any other vessels responding?" Daniel asked. Brandon Cole shook his head. "Negative, sir. The nearest human fleet is 12 days away. We're it." Daniel stood from his chair and walked to the main viewport. The stars looked the same as always, cold and beautiful, and utterly indifferent to the drama of the species that crawled between them. He thought about the colony, about the families living there, the children playing in parks built on alien soil, the dreamers who had traveled light years to start fresh. "Set course for 442B, he said. "Maximum speed." The ship's engineer looked up from his station. "Captain, you know what they're going to think when we show up alone, right?" "I know," Daniel replied. "They're going to think we're insane," continued. "1 ship against 3,000. "Let them think what they want," Daniel said. "Those are our people down there." Hayes, the medical officer, pulled up the colony manifest on her screen. 15,237 colonists, she read aloud, including 4,000 children under the age of 15. The bridge fell silent for a moment. Everyone understood what those numbers meant. 4 hours, Lisa said. "We'll be cutting it close." The Endeavor turned in space, its engines burning bright as it accelerated toward the crisis. Behind them, the survey mission they had been conducting for the past 6 weeks became irrelevant. Ahead, an impossible confrontation waited. News of the human response spread through the galactic network faster than light. Ambassador of the Assembly tried to open diplomatic channels with the offering to mediate, but Al refused all communication. The collective debated whether to intervene, but decided the risk was too great. Other species watched and waited, some with sympathy, others with cold, strategic interest. When Al learned that humanity was sending exactly 1 ship to respond to his armada, he laughed. The sound echoed through his bridge and his officers joined in. It was absurd. It was beyond absurd. It was insulting. 1 ship, he repeated, his voice full of mockery. They send 1 ship to face the might of the Dominion. Perhaps it is a symbolic gesture, his tactical officer suggested. A show of solidarity before they attempt negotiation. "There will be no negotiation," Al declared. When their lone ship arrives, we will capture it. We will parade it through the galaxy as proof of human foolishness, and then we will proceed with the bombardment as planned. The word spread. Species across the galaxy shook their heads in pity or disbelief. Some thought humanity was making a noble but futile gesture. Others believed the humans simply did not understand the scale of what they faced. A few wondered if there was some other explanation, but they kept their speculation quiet. Aboard the Endeavor, the crew worked in focused silence. Lisa monitored their approach vector, making micro-adjustments to shave seconds off their arrival time. Ran continuous diagnostics on every system, ensuring peak performance. Brandon kept communication channels open, listening to the chatter from a dozen different species, all of them assuming the human ship was flying toward its doom. Prepared the medical bay, though she knew that in a battle against 3,000 warships, medical supplies would be irrelevant. Daniel sat in his command chair, watching the countdown timer on his display, 3 hours and 42 minutes until they reached the system. He thought about the training, the simulations, the countless scenarios they had run through at the academy and in the fleet. He thought about Earth, about the world that had forged humanity in fire and pressure and endless struggle. Captain called from her station. She was the drone coordinator, a position that existed on every human ship but which few outside species understood. Running pre-deployment checks, all systems green. Good, Daniel replied. We're going to need everything working perfectly. Glanced over at station, then at Daniel. Sir, are we really going to do this? Daniel met his engineer's eyes. How many planets have humans colonized in the last century? 42, answered immediately. And how many have we lost to hostile action? None, sir. We're not starting today, Daniel said simply. The Endeavor crossed the threshold into the system right on schedule. Alarms sounded across the fleet as their sensors detected the new arrival. Al watched with amusement as the single human vessel appeared on his tactical display, a tiny dot against the overwhelming mass of his armada. Magnify, he ordered. The main screen showed the Endeavor in detail. It was a sleek vessel, perhaps 200 meters long, with smooth lines and minimal visible weapons. It looked like what it claimed to be, an exploration ship designed for survey missions and scientific research. That is what they send, Al said, his voice dripping with contempt. Scan it, I want to know every detail. His sensors officers worked quickly. Standard human design, one reported. Minimal armor plating, no significant weapons systems detected, crew complement estimated at 40 individuals. 40 against 3,000, Al mused. The humans are either braver or more foolish than I imagined. The Endeavor took up a position between the fleet and the planet. Daniel stood and straightened his uniform. Open a channel, he told Brandon. Let's talk to our friend the Supreme Commander. The communication connected almost instantly. Al's face appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes gleaming with amusement. Human Captain, he said, you have traveled far to witness your colony's destruction. I am almost impressed by your dedication to futility. Daniel smiled, a calm expression that did not reach his eyes. Supreme Commander Al, I am Captain Daniel Cross of the Earth vessel Endeavor. I am here to inform you that you are in violation of the Accords regarding hostile action against civilian populations. You have one opportunity to withdraw your fleet peacefully. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds before Al began to laugh again. This time, the sound was broadcast across every channel, shared with every species watching the confrontation. You offer me terms? Al asked between fits of laughter. You stand alone against my armada and offer me terms of withdrawal. One opportunity, Daniel repeated, his voice unchanged. That's all I'm authorized to give you. Then you have wasted your time, human, Al replied. I will give you this chance instead. Surrender your vessel now, and I will allow your crew to witness the colony's final moments before I decide what to do with you. Daniel turned to his crew. Lisa had her hand ready over her controls. His fingers danced across his engineering panel, sat perfectly still, waiting. Watched the medical readouts, tracking everyone's vital signs. Commander, Daniel said, turning back to the screen. I tried to warn you. He made a small gesture to Brandon, who cut the communication. The screen went dark. Al stared at his tactical display with growing confusion. The human ship was changing. The smooth hull that his sensors had scanned moments before was opening like a flower, thousands of panels retracting in perfect synchronization to reveal something underneath. "Report," he demanded, his amusement fatting into irritation. His sensor officer's voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Commander, I am detecting multiple objects separating from the main vessel. Count is now at 50. No, wait, 100. Commander, the count keeps rising." "What kind of objects?" Al asked. "Unknown, sir. They are small, perhaps 2 meters in length. They appear to be some kind of drone or autonomous unit. Current count is 170 and still climbing." On the Endeavor's bridge, watched her displays with intense focus. "Deployment at 60%, she reported. All units responding correctly, no malfunctions detected." Daniel stood with his hands behind his back, watching the main screen. It showed the space around their ship filling with small, dark objects that moved with purpose and precision. "How long until full deployment?" 90 seconds, answered. Lisa Park's sensors picked up movement from the fleet. "Captain, they're launching fighters. 300 vessels inbound, estimated arrival in 2 minutes." "Let them come," Daniel said calmly. "Status." "Deployment complete," replied. 200 units active and awaiting orders, all systems optimal." The drones spread out from the Endeavor in patterns that looked random but were anything but. They moved in waves and curves, following algorithms based on natural systems that Earth scientists had studied for centuries. The movement mimicked the way birds flocked, the way fish schooled, the way insects swarmed. It was organic, unpredictable, and completely foreign to military doctrine. Ambassador watched from his observation post on the home world. He had been monitoring the situation with growing concern, but now something else crept into his thoughts: curiosity. The human ship had revealed capabilities that intelligence reports had never mentioned. He opened a secure channel to his analysis team. "Get me everything we have on human vessel classifications," he ordered. "I want to know if this is standard for their fleet or if this ship is unique." The answer came back in less than a minute, and it chilled him. "Ambassador, our records indicate that every human vessel, military or civilian, shares similar design principles. We have never seen full deployment before, but theoretical analysis suggests all human ships may have dual-purpose capabilities." Sat back in his chair. "They disguise warships as exploration vessels." "No, sir. We believe they build exploration vessels that can function as warships. The distinction may seem subtle, but it is significant." Back in the system, the fighters closed in on the human drones, their weapons charged, targeting computers locking onto the small objects that drifted through space. The pilots were confident. They had fought countless battles, destroyed thousands of enemy vessels. These small drones would be swept aside easily. They opened fire. The drones moved. It happened so fast that the pilots barely registered what they were seeing. One moment their targets were drifting in predictable patterns. The next, the drones scattered in impossible directions, accelerating in ways that should have torn them apart. The weapon's fire passed through empty space, hitting nothing. "What in the void?" one pilot transmitted, his voice tight with confusion. The drones regrouped instantly, forming new patterns. They did not return fire. Instead, they simply positioned themselves between the fighters and the Endeavor, moving in concert like a single organism with 200 bodies. Al watched this unfold with growing anger. All fighters concentrate fire on a single target, overwhelm their evasion with volume. The pilots obeyed, focusing all 300 of their weapons on a single drone. The space around it lit up with plasma bolts and particle beams. For a moment, it seemed certain that the concentrated fire would destroy the target. The drone split apart. Not destroyed, but deliberately separated into 3 smaller components, each one dodging through the weapon's fire independently before reassembling on the other side of the barrage. The pilots stared in disbelief. Watched his engineering readouts with satisfaction. "Modular design working as intended," he reported. "The drones are adapting to their tactical patterns beautifully." Hayes had been monitoring the situation quietly, but now she spoke up. "Captain, I'm picking up confused communications from the fleet. They don't understand what they're fighting." "Good," Daniel replied. "Confusion is our friend right now." Brandon Cole looked up from his console. "Sir, we're receiving hails from a dozen different species. They want to talk. The collective is demanding an explanation. Even some of the neutral observers are asking questions. "Ignore them for now," Daniel said. "Our focus is on thee and the colony. Everything else is secondary." Made an adjustment to her controls. "Captain, the drones have established a defensive perimeter. The fighters cannot penetrate it without losses." "They'll try anyway," Daniel predicted. "Al's pride won't let him back down from a single human ship." He was right. The Supreme Commander ordered his fighters to press the attack, accepting casualties if necessary to break through the drone screen. The pilots were brave, well-trained, and experienced. They formed attack formations that had worked in dozens of previous battles, coordinating their assault with precision. The human drones responded by doing something they had never seen before. They stopped evading. Instead, they moved toward the incoming fighters, closing the distance at speeds that made the weapons tracking systems struggle to compensate. Before the pilots could adjust, the drones were among them, weaving through their formation like needles through cloth. Energy discharges rippled through space, but they came from the drones, not from explosive weapons. Electromagnetic pulses targeted specific systems on the fighters, surgical strikes that disabled weapons without destroying the ships themselves. Within seconds, 20 fighters went dark, their crews unharmed but their vessels completely inactive. "Pull back," one squadron leader shouted. "Pull back, they're disabling us." More fighters fell silent as the drones continued their work. The remaining pilots retreated in disorder, their confidence shattered by an enemy that fought in ways they could not predict or counter. Al slammed his fist against his command console. "How?" he demanded. "How are they doing this?" His tactical officer studied the sensor data, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. "Commander, their weapon systems do not match any known technology. They are using electromagnetic pulses, but the frequency and intensity are beyond our defensive capabilities. Our shielding is designed to stop plasma and particle weapons, not this." "Then adjust the shields," Al ordered. "Sir, it will take time to recalibrate. And based on what we are seeing, the human drones appear to be adapting their tactics in real time. By the time we adjust to counter one approach, they have already moved to another." Al stared at the tactical display, watching his fighter squadron fall apart against an enemy that should have been helpless. He had 3,000 ships. The humans had 200 drones and one small vessel. The mathematics should have been simple. Overwhelming force should have guaranteed victory. But the mathematics were not working out the way they should. Lisa Park spoke quietly to Daniel. "Captain, I'm detecting a shift in their fleet formation. They're consolidating around the flagship." "Preparing for a major assault," Daniel observed. "He's going to throw everything at us to prove he can win." "Can we hold them?" Lisa asked. Daniel considered the question. The drones were performing exactly as designed, better even than the simulations had predicted. But they were facing odds of 15 to 1. Eventually, sheer numbers would tell, unless he changed the equation. He said, "What's our power status?" "Running at 60% capacity," the engineer replied. "I've been keeping reserves for extended operations." "Bring us to 80%, Daniel ordered. "I want the drones running at full combat efficiency." "Aye, sir, increasing power flow now." Across the drone network, systems that had been operating conservatively suddenly surged with additional energy. The drones moved faster, their sensors reached farther, their weapons charged quicker. The difference was immediately apparent. Smiled as her readouts updated. "Captain, with this power increase, the drones can maintain current operations indefinitely. They cannot outlast us." Al reached the same conclusion at almost the same moment. His tactical officer delivered the assessment with reluctance. "Commander, at current attrition rates, we will lose our entire fighter complement before we breach their defensive screen. And if their main vessel is only operating at partial capacity, they may have significantly more capability in reserve." "Then we change tactics," Al declared. "Recall all fighters, prepare the capital ships for direct engagement. I want a full battleship assault, overwhelming firepower at close range. Let us see how their drones perform against vessels 1,000 times their size." His officers hurried to obey. Across the fleet, massive warships began to move into attack formation. These were not nimble fighters, but huge vessels bristling with weapons, protected by armor plating meters thick and shields that could absorb tremendous punishment. They advanced slowly, deliberately, and wall of steel and fire moving toward the lone human ship. On 442B, Wells watched the battle unfold on her command center displays. The colony director had ordered all non-essential personnel into the underground shelters, but she remained on the surface, refusing to hide while others fought for her people's survival. "How are they doing?" her assistant asked, his voice tight with tension. Studied the tactical feed that the Endeavor was sharing with the colony. "They're holding. Against impossible odds, they're holding." "But for how long?" She did not answer because she did not know. What she did know was that a single human ship had placed itself between her colony and annihilation. Whatever happened next, that fact would remain. In space, Daniel watched the capital ships advance. "Here we go," he said quietly. "This is what Al wanted all along, a show of overwhelming force." "Captain," Lisa said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what was approaching. "Those ships have weapons that can vaporize a city with a single shot. If they concentrate fire on us, our shields will not hold." "Then we make sure they cannot concentrate their fire," Daniel replied. He opened a channel to prepare for offensive deployment. It is time to show them what Earth engineers designed these drones to do. His fingers moved across her controls, unlocking systems that had remained dormant until now. "Offensive protocols armed and ready, Captain, awaiting your command." The human drones shifted from defensive patterns to something entirely different. They regrouped into tight formations, then dispersed again, moving through space like predators selecting targets. His console lit up with tactical data as each drone locked onto a specific capital ship. "Targets acquired," she reported. "All drones assigned, initiating attack run." The drones accelerated, not toward the center of the formation, but toward the edges, seeking vulnerable points in the massive ship's defenses. They moved with purpose, each unit following independent paths that somehow coordinated into a larger pattern. Al watched them come. "All ships open fire, destroy those drones before they reach effective range." The capital ships unleashed their weapons. Space filled with energy as hundreds of weapon systems fired simultaneously. Plasma bolts the size of houses roared through the void. Particle beams that could slice through asteroids swept across the darkness. Missiles with warheads powerful enough to crack a moon streaked toward their targets. The drones moved through it all. They did not dodge in straight lines or simple curves. Their paths twisted and spiraled, following routes that seemed to defy logic until you understood the mathematics behind them. Each drone calculated trajectories that maximized evasion while minimizing energy expenditure, using equations derived from Earth's natural systems. They moved like leaves in a storm, like fish in a current, like birds in a hurricane. "Impossible," a gunnery officer whispered, watching his weapons miss again and again. "Nothing that small should be able to move like that." The first wave of drones reached the capital ships. What happened next shocked every observer watching from across the galaxy. The drones did not attack the ship's hulls or shields directly. Instead, they targeted specific systems with precision that should not have been possible. Rail guns, no larger than a human arm, fired projectiles at relativistic speeds into sensor arrays. Electromagnetic pulse generators discharged concentrated bursts that fried power distribution nodes. And some drones carried weapons that the galaxy had never seen before, devices that called directed entropic accelerators. These weapons worked on a principle that most species had studied but dismissed as impractical. They accelerated the natural decay of matter, forcing metal to corrode, circuits to degrade, and structural integrity to fail. The effect was localized and temporary, but against complex machinery, it was devastating. A battleship's main weapon array simply stopped working. The massive guns that had crushed planets fell silent as their firing mechanisms aged 1,000 years in a few seconds. Another ship lost its shield generators, the protective barrier flickering and dying as components failed throughout the system. A third vessel went dark as its power core shut down, safety protocols engaging to prevent a catastrophic overload. All of this happened in less than 20 seconds. Brandon Cole listened to the communications traffic from the fleet with growing amazement. "Captain, they're panicking. I'm hearing damage reports from over 40 ships." "How many drones lost?" Daniel asked. Checked her display. "Zero, sir. All units are intact and repositioning for the next attack run." Ambassador had summoned his top military analysts to his observation chamber. They watched the battle unfold with expressions that ranged from shock to fear. "Explain to me how this is possible," demanded. "Explain how 200 small drones are dismantling one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy." The senior analyst, a veteran of 3 wars, spoke carefully. "Ambassador, the humans are not fighting the way we understand warfare. They use overwhelming force, concentrating firepower to destroy enemy vessels. Most galactic militaries operate on similar principles, but the humans are not trying to destroy the fleet." "Then what are they trying to do?" "They are trying to disable it," the analyst replied. "Every attack is surgical, targeted at specific systems rather than general destruction. They are degrading the combat effectiveness without killing anyone. It is a level of precision we have never seen in fleet combat." "Why?" asked. "Why not simply destroy their enemies?" The analyst pulled up a file on human military history, data that they had been collecting since humanity's emergence onto the galactic stage. "Our research suggests that humans view warfare differently than we do. They developed their military doctrines on a single planet, fighting each other for thousands of years. They learned to minimize casualties even among their enemies, because today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally. They built their entire strategic philosophy around the idea that unnecessary death is wasteful." "That makes no sense," another analyst interjected. "In war, you crush your enemy completely. You do not give them the chance to recover and strike back." "That is the philosophy," the senior analyst agreed. "But humans evolved on a world where cooperation was as important as competition. They learned to fight without hatred, to win without genocide, and now they are applying those lessons to space warfare." In the system, Al was learning this lesson the hard way. His fleet, which had seemed invincible just minutes before, was falling apart. Not through destruction, but through systematic degradation. Ship after ship reported critical systems offline, weapons disabled, shields failing. "Get me a casualty count," he ordered. His tactical officer looked relieved as he delivered the report. "0 fatalities, Commander. The human weapons are causing significant damage to our systems, but they are not targeting life support or crew compartments. No ships have been destroyed." This information, which should have been comforting, only made Al angrier. The humans were toying with him, demonstrating their superiority without even trying to kill his soldiers. It was the ultimate insult. "Prepare the kinetic bombardment systems," he commanded. "Target the planet directly. If the humans want to play games, I will show them the price of their arrogance." His weapons officer hesitated. "Sir, that would mean targeting civilian populations. The galactic community would condemn such an action." "I do not care about the galactic community," Al snarled. "I care about victory, and if I cannot defeat this human ship, I will at least accomplish my original mission. The colony will be destroyed." Massive hatches opened on the underside of the flagship, revealing weapons designed not for ship-to-ship combat but for planetary assault. These were the tools of genocide, bombs that could crack continents and turn atmospheres toxic. They had used them before, on worlds that refused to surrender. They would use them again. Lisa Park's sensors detected the change immediately. "Captain, the flagship is preparing to fire on the colony. Estimated time to launch 90 seconds. Daniel's expression hardened. Throughout the engagement, he had remained calm, almost gentle in his approach. But now something shifted in his demeanor. His voice, when he spoke, carried an edge that his crew had rarely heard. "Redirect all drones to the flagship. Priority target is the bombardment system. I need everything you can give me. Every ounce of power, every system override, everything." "Captain," said quietly, "if I remove all safety limiters, we will be running at 120% capacity. The ship was not designed for sustained operation at those levels." "I know," Daniel replied. "Do it anyway." Hayes watched the vital signs of the bridge crew on her medical displays. Heart rates were increasing, but not from fear. She recognized the patterns from human evolutionary history, the physiological response that kicked in when protecting others, especially children. It was one of the oldest human instincts, hardwired into their genetics by millions of years of evolution. The Endeavor's power system surged. Every reactor came online, every backup system activated, every reserve capacity channeled into the drone network. On display, the drone's performance parameters jumped dramatically. All limiters removed, reported. Drones are now operating at maximum combat efficiency. The drones changed their behavior instantly. Where before they had moved with calculated precision, now they moved with absolute aggression. They swarmed toward the flagship, ignoring all other targets, focused entirely on preventing the planetary bombardment. Al's defensive systems tried to stop them. Point defense weapons fired in desperate patterns. Shield generators pushed beyond their rated capacity. Every defensive measure the flagship possessed activated simultaneously. It was not enough. The drones penetrated the defenses through sheer speed and coordination. They moved as one organism, sacrificing optimal approach vectors to maximize speed. Several took glancing hits from point defense systems, their armor scorched but integrity maintained. They reached the flagship and went to work. This time there was no subtlety. Rail guns fired continuously, punching through armor plating to reach the bombardment systems beneath. Electromagnetic pulses discharged at maximum intensity, overloading circuits and fusing control mechanisms. The directed entropic accelerators focused their effect, aging the massive weapons until metal became brittle and explosives became inert. In 45 seconds, the flagship's planetary bombardment capability ceased to exist. Not disabled, destroyed. Al stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "How?" he whispered. "How did they do that?" His tactical officer's voice was shaken. "Commander, the human drones just demonstrated combat capabilities beyond anything in our database. They moved faster, hit harder, and coordinated better than our models predicted was possible." "Where did they get such technology?" Al demanded. It was a question that species across the galaxy were asking. In the assembly, in the collective, in 100 observation posts and monitoring stations, analysts were reviewing the battle data and reaching disturbing conclusions. Humanity had entered the galactic stage less than a century ago. They had seemed like typical newcomers, enthusiastic but inexperienced, technologically competent but not exceptional. Every species had assumed they understood what humans were capable of. They had all been wrong. Daniel opened a communication channel to the flagship. Al's face appeared on the screen, no longer smug or amused. The Supreme Commander looked like someone who had just discovered that the universe was not what he thought it was. "You tried to target civilians," Daniel said, his voice cold. "You crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed." "What are you?" Al asked. The question was not rhetorical. He genuinely wanted to know what kind of species could do what he had just witnessed. "We are humans," Daniel replied simply. "We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned to adapt, to survive, to protect each other against impossible odds. And now that we are in space, we bring those lessons with us." "One ship," Al said, still struggling to process what had happened. "You sent one ship." "We sent one ship because one ship was all we needed," Daniel explained. "Every vessel in the human fleet is designed the way the Endeavor is designed. We do not build separate civilian and military ships. We build ships that can survive, that can adapt, that can fight if they must. Because we learned on Earth that the difference between peace and war can vanish in a heartbeat." Lisa Park detected new movement from the fleet. "Captain, they're repositioning. It looks like they're preparing for a full fleet assault." Daniel nodded slowly. "Al, you have one more chance. Withdraw your fleet now. Accept that you cannot win this fight, or I will show you what the Endeavor can really do when we stop holding back." "Holding back," Al repeated. "You mean you have not been using your full capability?" "We have been running at 80% power," Daniel said. "We have been using non-lethal tactics. We have been trying to end this without killing anyone. But you targeted children, Supreme Commander. You tried to murder 15,000 civilians, including 4,000 children under the age of 15. That changes things." Pulled up a new interface on his console, one that he had hoped he would never need to use. "Captain, authorization required for full combat protocols." Daniel entered his command codes without hesitation. "Authorization granted. You are cleared for lethal force if necessary, but only if necessary." "Understood, Captain," replied, her voice steady despite the weight of that authorization. Al made his decision. Pride, anger, and the weight of the Dominion's reputation pushed him forward. He could not retreat before a single ship, could not admit defeat in front of the entire galaxy. He would commit everything, throw his entire fleet at the human vessel and crush it through sheer mass if nothing else. "All ships," he transmitted across his fleet. "Prepare for final assault. We will overwhelm them with numbers. Every vessel will concentrate fire on that single ship, destroy it, and we destroy humanity's hopes in this sector." 1,000 capital ships began to move, forming a sphere that would converge on the Endeavor from all directions simultaneously. It was a tactic designed to make evasion impossible, to ensure that overwhelming firepower would find its target. Daniel watched them come, watched the tactical display fill with red icons representing incoming threats. The transformation was immediate and total. Power that had been carefully managed and conserved now flowed freely through every system aboard the Endeavor. The drones, which had been operating efficiently but cautiously, suddenly moved with frightening speed and purpose. Watched her displays with intense focus as new capabilities unlocked across the drone network. "Captain, full combat protocols are active. The drones are networking at maximum efficiency. They are operating as a single distributed intelligence now." "Explain that to someone who is not an engineer," Hayes requested, her medical training giving her little insight into the technical details unfolding around her. Chose her words carefully. Each drone has its own processing capability, but when networked together, they form something greater than the sum of their parts. They share sensor data instantaneously, coordinate tactics without communication lag, and adapt to threats faster than any individual AI system could manage. It is like the difference between 200 people working separately and 200 people working as one mind. "That should not be possible," Lisa Park said, her sensor arrays tracking the drone movements with difficulty. "The processing power required to coordinate that many independent units in real time exceeds anything in the galactic database." "It exceeds anything anyone else has built," corrected. "But humans designed these systems using different principles. We did not try to create one central intelligence controlling everything. We created a network where each unit contributes to collective decision-making. It is how ant colonies work, how the human immune system operates, how neurons in a brain fire together. Nature solved this problem billions of years ago. We just applied those solutions to warfare." The fleet advanced, 1,000 capital ships moving in synchronized patterns designed to overwhelm any defense through sheer volume. Al watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. No matter how capable the human drones were, they could not be everywhere at once. Simple mathematics dictated that his fleet would break through. The mathematics were about to change. The human drones did not form a defensive line or screen. Instead, they scattered throughout the approaching formation, positioning themselves seemingly at random. Then they activated a capability that no one had seen before. Each drone became a relay point for the others. Sensor data from one unit instantly became available to all units. Targeting solutions calculated by one drone were shared across the network. The effect was that every drone could see everything, predict movements across the entire battlefield, and respond to threats that had not even materialized yet. "Contact in 30 seconds, Lisa reported. They are maintaining formation and speed." Daniel stood at the center of his bridge, hands behind his back, expression calm. "Engage at will. Rules of engagement. Disable when possible, destroy when necessary. Priority is protecting the colony and this ship. Secondary priority is minimizing casualties." "Understood, Captain," replied. Her fingers moved across her console, not inputting commands but confirming decisions that the drone network was making autonomously. Her role had shifted from controller to supervisor, monitoring the network's actions and authorizing escalation when required. The first ship entered effective weapons range and fired. A massive plasma bolt, powerful enough to vaporize a city block, roared toward the Endeavor. 3 drones moved into its path and activated their directed entropic accelerators in concert, targeting the plasma bolt itself. The superheated gas dissipated as its molecular bonds weakened, the devastating weapon reduced to harmless particles before it reached its target. "They just stopped a plasma bolt in flight," Brandon Cole said, his voice filled with disbelief. "I have never seen anything like that." More ships opened fire. The space around the Endeavor filled with enough destructive energy to glass a planet. The drones moved through it like dancers, intercepting some attacks, deflecting others, using the ship's own shields against them by bouncing attacks into different vectors. And then they went on the offensive. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The drones did not simply attack. They hunted. Each unit identified targets based on threat assessment, strategic value, and probability of success. They coordinated their strikes so that multiple drones hit multiple ships simultaneously, overwhelming defensive systems that were designed to counter single-point attacks. A battleship lost its main weapons array as 6 drones struck it from different angles in perfect synchronization. Another vessel went dark as electromagnetic pulses fried its power distribution network. A third ship tumbled out of formation as its maneuvering thrusters were systematically disabled, leaving it helpless but intact. Al watched his fleet fall apart with growing horror. All ships break formation, engage independently, do not let them coordinate against you. His tactical officer shook his head. Commander, breaking formation will only make it worse. The human drones are tracking every ship individually. Staying together is our only chance to provide mutual support. Then what do you suggest? Al demanded. Retreat, sir. We have lost this engagement. Continuing will only result in the total loss of the fleet. No, Al slammed his fist against his console. I will not retreat before a single human ship. I will not give them that satisfaction. But his fleet was retreating anyway. Individual captains, seeing their ships disabled and defenseless, were pulling back without orders. Some were broadcasting surrender signals. Others simply powered down their weapons and shields, hoping the humans would show mercy. The drones responded to these surrenders immediately, shifting their attention away from non-threatening vessels toward those still actively fighting. The tactical network recalculated priorities in real time, focusing resources where they were most needed. Monitored the power consumption with concern. Captain, we are running hot. Sustained operations at this level will start causing system degradation in approximately 15 minutes. Will we need 15 minutes? Daniel asked. Check the tactical display, watching the fleet fall apart. Probably not, sir. Wells watched from the colony command center as the impossible battle continued. Her assistant had pulled up a casualty count, expecting to see horrific numbers. Instead, they saw something that did not make sense. Director, they are reporting 0 fatalities, he said. Hundreds of ships disabled, thousands of systems destroyed, but no deaths. Understood what that meant. The single human ship fighting for her colony was winning without killing. It was demonstrating superiority without genocide. It was showing the galaxy that humanity could protect without becoming monsters. Get me a channel to Captain Cross, she ordered. I want him to know what he is doing here. I want him to understand what this means to us. The channel connected, and Daniel's face appeared on her screen. Behind him, she could see the activity on the Endeavor's bridge, crew members working with focused intensity, displays showing the tactical situation. Director Wells, Daniel said, I recommend you remain in the shelters until this is resolved. Captain, I called to tell you something, replied. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, you need to know that you have already saved this colony, not just from destruction, but from something worse. You have saved us from becoming the kind of people who accept genocide, who look away when civilians are threatened, who value survival over principles. Daniel's expression softened slightly. We are just doing our job, Director. No, said firmly. You are doing far more than that. You are showing the galaxy what humanity stands for. Please make sure you survive to see the result. The communication ended. Daniel turned back to the main display, watching the fleet continue to disintegrate. Then something new appeared on the sensors. Captain, Lisa said urgently, the flagship is moving. It is breaking away from the main formation and heading directly toward us. Maximum speed. Al had made his final decision. If he could not win, if he could not destroy the colony, he would at least take the human ship with him. He had ordered his flagship to ram the Endeavor at full acceleration. The impact would destroy both vessels, but it would give the Dominion a measure of revenge. He is going to ram us, Brandon reported. Impact in 90 seconds. Checked her drone positions. I can intercept the flagship, but I will need to use lethal force. His shields are still operational, and the only way to stop a ship that size is to destroy its engines or command structure. Daniel considered his options. He could destroy the flagship, killing Al and everyone aboard, or he could try to disable it, risking his own ship and crew in the process. The choice should have been simple. Self-defense was justified. No one would blame him for protecting his people. But Daniel had not come this far, had not fought this hard, to end things with unnecessary death. "Can you give me more power to the forward shields?" he asked. "Captain, if that ship hits us, shields will not matter. The kinetic energy alone will tear us apart." "Can you do it or not?" Ran the calculations. "Yes, sir, but I cannot guarantee how long the shields will hold." "Do it. I need every drone focused on the flagship's engines. You have 60 seconds to stop that ship without destroying it." "Sir, that may not be possible," protested. "Then make it possible," Daniel said calmly. "We did not come this far to kill people if we can avoid it." The drones swarmed toward the flagship, abandoning all other targets to focus on the single approaching vessel. They had 60 seconds to stop a ship massing hundreds of thousands of tons, moving at velocities that made it essentially a guided missile. Hands flew across her console, directing the network with desperate precision. Rail guns targeted the flagship's engine nacelles, trying to disable thrust without triggering catastrophic explosions. Electromagnetic pulse weapons fired continuously, attempting to override the ship's control systems. The directed entropic accelerators focused on structural supports, trying to weaken the ship enough that it would break apart before impact. 45 seconds to impact. The flagship showed no sign of slowing. 30 seconds. Several drones were destroyed by the flagship's point defense systems, but the others pressed on. 20 seconds. One of the main engine nacelles shuddered and went dark. The flagship's acceleration decreased, but it was still moving too fast. 15 seconds. Another engine failed. The flagship began to spin as thrust became unbalanced. 10 seconds. The drones had done everything they could. It was not enough. The flagship was going to hit. Diverted every available bit of power to the forward shields. Braced herself at her station. Brandon gripped his console. Lisa's hands remained steady on her controls, ready to execute evasive maneuvers that she knew would be futile. 5 seconds. Daniel stood perfectly still, watching the flagship grow larger on the main display. He had made his choice. He had chosen to preserve life, even enemy life, even at the risk of his own ship and crew. If that choice killed him, at least it would be a death with meaning. 3 seconds. 2. The flagship's remaining engines exploded. Not from drone weapons, but from the strain of operating at maximum power with unbalanced thrust. The massive vessel shuddered, its forward momentum carrying it toward the Endeavor, but its trajectory suddenly unstable. 1 second. The flagship tumbled past the Endeavor, missing by less than 50 meters. The proximity alarms screamed as the massive vessel spun out of control, engines dead, systems failing, but crew intact. The Endeavor's bridge erupted in relieved exhales and quiet exclamations. They had survived. The gamble had paid off. "Damage report," Daniel requested, his voice steady despite having just faced imminent death. "Shields held," reported. "Minor stress damage to the forward superstructure, nothing critical. We are intact and operational." Daniel turned to look at the main display where the flagship drifted, powerless but whole. "Get me a channel to Al." The Supreme Commander's face appeared on the screen. He looked defeated, broken, nothing like the arrogant leader who had threatened genocide hours before. "You could have destroyed my ship," Al said quietly. "You could have killed us all, why did you not?" "Because killing you would not have accomplished anything," Daniel replied. "We came here to protect our colony, we have done that. We have proven that your fleet cannot threaten them. Making you a martyr serves no purpose." Surrender was broadcast across every channel, transmitted to every species that had been watching the confrontation. Al's voice, stripped of arrogance and pride, delivered the terms of his defeat. The fleet would withdraw immediately. They would pay reparations to the human colony for damages and distress. They would submit to independent monitoring to ensure compliance. And they would remember. Within an hour, the first ships began their retreat, limping away from 442B with damaged systems and shaken crews. The massive fleet that had seemed so overwhelming just hours before now looked like what it was, a broken force that had encountered something it could not understand or defeat. Daniel stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, watching the depart. His crew worked quietly around him, securing systems and running diagnostics after the intense combat operations. The bridge had a different atmosphere now, a mixture of relief and quiet pride. All vessels have crossed the system boundary, Lisa Park reported. They are heading back toward Dominion space. Long-range sensors confirm they are maintaining their retreat vector. Good, Daniel replied. Brandon, open a channel to the colony. Wells appeared on the main screen, her face showing exhaustion and overwhelming relief. Behind her, Daniel could see colonists emerging from shelters, families reuniting, children running through streets that hours before had been under threat of annihilation. Captain Cross, said, her voice thick with emotion, how can we possibly thank you? You already did, Daniel replied. You built a colony out here on the frontier. You took the risk of bringing human life to a new world. That is what we came to protect. That is what made everything else worthwhile. Will you come down to the surface? Asked. The colonists want to meet the crew that saved them. Daniel glanced at his bridge crew. They looked back at him with expressions that said they would appreciate some time on solid ground after the intensity of the last few hours. We will come down for a brief visit, he agreed. But we have a mission to complete. There are still surveys to conduct, and this ship has a purpose beyond combat. The channel closed, approached Daniel with a tablet displaying system status reports. Captain, we took more strain than I would have liked. Nothing critical, but we should probably schedule some maintenance time at a proper facility. How long can we operate safely? Daniel asked. Weeks, maybe months, replied. But I would prefer not to push it. The power systems were never designed to operate at 120% capacity for extended periods. We will finish our survey mission, then head back for maintenance, Daniel decided. But first, let us pay our respects to the people we came to protect. The Endeavour descended through 442B's atmosphere several hours later. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents not unlike Earth. The colony had been established on a coastal plain, where rivers met the sea and the soil was rich enough to support Earth crops with minimal modification. Thousands of colonists gathered to greet the shuttle that brought Daniel and his crew to the surface. Children waved flags. Adults cheered. Wells stood at the front of the crowd, ready to give formal thanks to the people who had saved her world. But it was Hayes who spoke first, stepping forward to address the crowd with the directness of someone who had spent the battle monitoring vital signs and preparing for casualties that never came. We did what any human ship would have done, she said simply. You are our people, you were in danger, we came, that is all there is to it. The crowd erupted in applause, but words resonated beyond 442B. They had been transmitted across the galactic network, recorded and analyzed by every species that had witnessed the battle. And they revealed something that many had not fully understood about humanity. Humans did not protect their colonies out of strategic interest or political calculation. They protected them because they were family. Every human settlement, no matter how distant or how small, mattered to every other human. It was not a policy. It was identity. Ambassador convened an emergency session of the Assembly 3 days after the battle. Representatives from 40 different species gathered to discuss the implications of what they had witnessed. We need to reassess our understanding of human capabilities, announced. Everything we thought we knew about their technological level, their military doctrine, and their strategic intentions requires reconsideration. The representative, a crystalline being named, spoke with characteristic directness. What we need to reassess is our assumption that we understood how warfare should be conducted. The humans demonstrated capabilities that our best analysts said were impossible. They demonstrated more than capabilities, corrected. They demonstrated philosophy. They won a battle against overwhelming odds without seeking to destroy their enemy. They protected civilians while minimizing all casualties, even among hostile forces. This is not simply a different way of fighting. This is a different way of thinking about conflict itself. The discussion continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Humanity had emerged as a major power not through conquest or intimidation, but through demonstration. They had shown what they could do, and more importantly, they had shown what they chose not to do. The galactic political landscape shifted overnight. Species that had viewed humanity as inconsequential newcomers began treating them as peers. Trade negotiations took on new urgency. Diplomatic channels expanded. And most significantly, aggressive species that had been eyeing human colonies with predatory interest quietly reconsidered their plans. The Dominion experienced the most dramatic change. Al was removed from command, not for losing the battle, but for provoking it in the first place. The new leadership instituted reforms, reducing military spending and focusing on diplomatic solutions to territorial disputes. They had learned that force was not always the answer, particularly when facing an opponent who could counter force with precision and restraint. Aboard the Endeavour, life returned to normal. The ship completed its survey mission, cataloging stellar phenomena and mapping potential colony sites. The crew worked with the same professionalism they had shown during the battle, treating exploration with the same dedication they had given to combat. Ran maintenance on the drone network, repairing the units that had been damaged and updating the tactical algorithms based on battle performance. The drones had exceeded all expectations, but she knew that other species would be analyzing their capabilities and developing countermeasures. The next confrontation, if there was one, would require new approaches. "Do you think we will have to fight again?" she asked Daniel one evening as they reviewed the mission logs. "Probably," Daniel replied honestly. "There are always going to be species that mistake kindness for weakness, that see humanity's restraint as an invitation to test our limits. But each time we demonstrate what we are capable of, the lessons sink in a little deeper." "We could have destroyed the fleet," said. "It would have sent an even stronger message." "It would have sent the wrong message," Daniel corrected. "Strength without control is just brutality. Anyone can destroy. What matters is having the power to destroy and choosing not to use it. That is what makes humanity different." Lisa Park entered the observation deck where they were talking. "Captain, we just received a transmission from Earth Fleet Command. They want a full report on the incident, and they have some questions about our combat performance." Daniel smiled slightly. "I imagine they do. Did they indicate whether the questions were concerned or impressed?" "Both, sir," Lisa replied. "There is some debate about whether we should have avoided the confrontation entirely, allowed it to take the colony, and then negotiated its return through diplomatic channels. That would have meant abandoning 15,000 people to their fate," Daniel said flatly. "Whatever debate Command wants to have about tactics, that is not negotiable. We do not abandon our people, ever." "I will include that sentiment in the report," Lisa said with a slight smile. The Endeavour continued its journey through the frontier regions, conducting surveys and collecting data. But the ship's reputation preceded it now. Systems that might have been hostile became cooperative. Species that had been neutral became friendly. The single ship that had faced down the Dominion became a symbol of human capability and human values. 6 months after the battle, Daniel received a personal message from Wells. The colony was thriving. The population had grown as new settlers arrived, emboldened by the knowledge that humanity would protect them. They had named the largest settlement Cross City in honor of the captain who had saved them. Daniel read the message in his quarters, alone with his thoughts. He thought about the battle, about the choices he had made, about the lives that had hung in the balance. He thought about the colonists he had met, the children who had looked at him like a hero, the families who had thanked him for their futures. He thought about Earth, about the world that had forged humanity in violence and struggle, but also taught them compassion and cooperation. He thought about the generations of humans who had learned to fight their environment, fight each other, and eventually learned to fight for each other. And he thought about the galaxy, about the hundreds of species trying to make sense of these strange newcomers from a world they called a. They were still learning what it meant that humans came from a place where survival required both strength and mercy, where power meant nothing without purpose. The door chimed, entered carrying a tablet with maintenance reports. "Captain, I have finished the analysis on the power systems. We pushed them hard, but they held up better than I expected. Human engineering at its finest." "How long until we need major repairs?" Daniel asked. "We are good for another month of normal operations," replied. "Then we should head back to Earth for a complete overhaul, give the ship the care it deserves after what it did for us." Daniel nodded. "We will complete the current survey sector, then plot a course home. The Endeavour has earned a rest." Hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind since the battle. "Captain, do you think the galaxy understands now? Understands why we sent one ship?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "Some of them understand. Others will need more time. But eventually, they will all learn the same lesson. Humanity does not measure strength by the size of our fleets or the number of ships we deploy. We measure it by what we are willing to do with the resources we have." One ship was enough, said quietly. One ship is always enough, Daniel replied. When that ship is designed by people who learned to survive on a world that tried to kill them every day, built with the accumulated knowledge of centuries of warfare and cooperation, crewed by individuals who understand that protection is not just a duty but an identity. One ship is enough because we build every ship to be enough. Left and Daniel returned to the viewport, watching the stars slide past as the Endeavor continued its journey. Out there, across thousands of light years, other human ships conducted their missions. Exploration vessels like his own, colony ships carrying dreams to new worlds, trade vessels connecting humanity to the broader galactic community. And every single one of them, civilian or military, exploration or commercial, was designed with the same principle. They could all fight if they had to. They could all protect if necessary. Because humanity had learned on Earth that peace was not the absence of capability, but the choice not to use it. The galaxy was still learning this lesson. Species that had conquered through force were discovering that force alone was not enough. Civilizations that had built their identities around military might were finding that might without purpose was hollow. Humanity offered a different model, strength paired with restraint, capability paired with compassion, the willingness to fight paired with the wisdom to know when fighting was necessary and when it was not. Daniel thought about future encounters, about the conflicts that would inevitably arise as humanity expanded into the galaxy. There would be species that tested them, challenges that pushed them, situations that demanded difficult choices. But he was confident that humanity would face them the same way they had faced with strength, with intelligence, with mercy when possible, force when necessary, and always with the understanding that power was meaningless unless it served a purpose greater than itself. The Endeavor sailed on through the darkness between stars, a single ship among billions, carrying within it the lessons that Earth had taught its children. Lessons about survival and adaptation. Lessons about cooperation and conflict. Lessons about when to fight and when to forgive. And across the galaxy, other species watched and learned. They learned that humanity sent one ship not because they could not send more, but because one ship, built with human ingenuity and crewed with human determination, was all they ever needed to send. They learned that the size of the fleet mattered less than the quality of its design. That overwhelming numbers could not compensate for superior tactics, that destruction was easy but preservation was hard, and that humanity had chosen the harder path. Most importantly, they learned that when humans said they would protect their people, it was not a political statement or a strategic posture. It was a promise written into the very design of their ships, the very training of their crews, the very essence of what it meant to be human. One ship had changed the galaxy's understanding of what humanity represented. One battle had rewritten assumptions about human capabilities. One captain's choice to preserve life rather than take it had demonstrated values that transcended victory. And in colonies across human space, in settlements on dozens of worlds, people slept safely knowing that if danger came, if threats materialized, if someone tried to harm them, humanity would respond. They would send one ship. And one ship would be enough. Al stared at the human captain with something approaching respect. What happens now? Now you surrender, Daniel said. You withdraw your fleet, you leave this system and never return, and you tell the galaxy what you learned here today. About the colonists below, safe in their shelters, trusting that the single ship that had come to save them would be enough. He thought about Earth, about the generations of humans who had fought and died to protect their children from predators and disasters and each other. He thought about the responsibility that came with the power humanity had developed, the burden of being strong enough to destroy, but choosing instead to preserve. All hands, he said over the ship-wide channel. Prepare for full combat operations. This is what we trained for. This is why Earth builds the ships we serve on. Show them what humans can do. Across the Endeavor, systems came fully online. The ship stopped holding anything in reserve. Daniel took a breath, thinking about the colonists below, the children in the shelters, the families trusting that humanity would protect them. He thought about Earth, about the world that had taught his species to survive against every threat nature could devise. And he thought about the confident in their power, certain that numbers and force would prevail as they always had. Show them, he said. Daniel said quietly, show them. The engineer's hands moved across his console, entering codes that he had practiced 1,000 times but never used in actual combat. "Aye, Captain. Initiating deployment sequence." Across the hull of the Endeavour, thousands of small panels began to retract.